Anyway,
Okay, we are recording. So Cindy, you want to get us started?
I do. I'm Cindy Bell. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of the Mid-Hudson Region. I'm going to start off with the mission statement because I always do. The League of Women Voters, a nonpartisan political organization, encourages informed and active participation in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. I did want to mention that we co-sponsored the Healthcare Reform Forum with the League in Davis, California. That event was recorded, so if anybody wants to see that one, I can send the link. And we still have voter guides. So if anybody wants any, Cindy Land said, you know, we don't have a lot, but we have enough. So if anybody wants them, I'm happy to drop them in the mail or deliver them. Daisy has a bunch of them also.
And did you, Board of Elections now has some, correct?
Yes, we
Yes.
have them.
Yeah,
Awesome.
and you can spread them around anywhere that you want, Ashley and John. Just because, you know, it's just something that people are going to come in to vote and they're going to be annoyed because they don't know what this is.
Mhm.
So, you know, that's why we're really trying to get the word out about it.
Yeah.
And we also have an online event on Sunday at 2:00, and that's going to be What's on Your Ballot. And it's going to feature Jennifer Wilson, who is the deputy director of the League in New York State, and Jerry Benjamin, who you know, he's a governmental expert. He's retired now, but we were able to get him. He's been a friend to the League for a long time, and he has too many titles to tell you about. So I also wanted to make a note, if you know anybody who's interested in being an election inspector this year, the Ulster County League is short of inspectors for election day. It's really kind of a fun thing. I know that DARES does it, and I've done it forever, just because it's a great way to connect with people in the town. And we get all of the gossip. Everybody that comes in has, you know so if you know of anybody, that's, you know, a big push right now. They're having late trainings. So I think that's it for me. I'm going to turn this over to Mara, and yeah, take it away.
Thank you so much, Cindy. So it is, it's so, oh, awesome. We got another person coming in. It's so wonderful to do these kinds of events in Ulster County. I feel very honored to be a citizen of Ulster County because our commissioners who have joined us this evening are always so willing to say yes quickly when we ask them things, and to work in collaboration with one another across parties, and dedicate time to educating the electorate and engaging the public in the election process. So I'm so grateful to introduce Ashley Dittus and John Quigley, who are the commissioners of elections for Ulster County, who work together to put together this primer for us. It is quite a lengthy PowerPoint. I think in the first couple of slides, maybe the first third, it's really just understanding like the architecture of the Board of Elections and sort of like who you are, and frame it. And then of course, there's in the last 2 years been so many changes to how we vote and how the early voting works. And we want to, of course, by the end, really focus in on how we are voting in Ulster County this year, in terms of days, times, locations, and that sort of thing. So I know you have a lot to get through, so I just want to hand it over to you. So Ashley and John, thank you so much for joining us today and putting this together.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us. We are going to get started because there is a lot to cover. This is a PowerPoint that will go through sort of our structure, as Maura said, the architecture of how elections are run. I think that that's important to get clear, because right now in the news, there's such a focus on elections, and a lot of it is elections that are outside of the state of New York. How is Texas running their elections, or Florida, Arizona, Wisconsin? It all varies state by state, so we'll cover that, what New York State does specifically. And then we'll talk about all of the changes to the law that's been put in front of us and has been changing the work that John and I do since 2019. And then we'll do a quick spotlight on this year's elections. We won't cover it in too much depth, because I know you are going to have that great program this weekend. Well, let's get started and just jump in if you have a question. We're a smaller group. I know we're being recorded, so the questions that you have, other folks that are watching this, they might have also. So don't be shy. We're here to answer all of your questions. There are no bad questions, especially in elections. It's better to ask a question than walk away being confused. So let's quickly talk about our structure in New York State. So all counties have a board of elections, though that was established in the late 1800s with the Constitutional Convention, which put forth a bipartisan structure. So the top two parties run the Board of Elections in concert with one another. So together, we run the Board of Elections, and that's historically been the Democrats and the Republicans. We represent the top two party placements that run every governor's election year. That's how the boards are politically determined. So if for whatever reason next year with the governor's election, the Working Families Party and the Conservative Party take spots 1 and 2, they will then be running the Board of Elections. That's how the law is written. It's the top two parties every 4 years. We are then personally elected by our county parties committees. So the Democratic Committee elects me, the Republican Party elects John. That recommendation then goes to the Ulster County Legislature, and they pass a resolution to appoint us and install us for the 2-year term. In Ulster, it's a 2-year term. Some counties have a 4-year term. That's also locally determined. There is no state mandate on the length of the term of commissioners, nor is there a mandate on if commissioners are full-time or part-time. That's determined by at the local level by the local entity in Ulster County. That's the Ulster County Legislature. The New York State Board of Elections is not as old. They were established in the mid-70s in 1974. They all fall under the executive powers of the governor, and they are chiefly responsible for making sure that we are following the laws, and they are regulatory. There are 4 bipartisan commissioners, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans. There's a lot of things that guide us, what we do, but the biggest one is the New York State election law. That is our guiding light. These other documents support everything, and some have influence on what we are doing. When we go to the rule book, it's usually the election law, but if the election law doesn't address it, public officers law may, education law, the US and New York State constitutions, county charters also can change your election structure on a local level, local laws, resolutions, executive orders, which we had a whole bunch of last year. And then in the absence of all that, case law does determine questions that come up very often.
As much as voters like to think that we get to make some of the laws, unfortunately we don't. But those are many of the different attributes of where we get our laws from. And we've seen different ones come into play, such as our recount laws, which were established on the county level and now on a statewide level. As they get more advanced and more in depth and more well adopted, that's something we get to look forward to every year.
Exactly. In our office in Ulster County, we are a staff of 12 full-time employees. That's also bipartisan in nature. So there are 6 Democrat employees, including myself, and 6 Republican employees, including John. So each position that we have within our department has a counterpart of the opposite party: 2 commissioners, 2 deputies, 2 administrative assistants. There are 4 clerks, and there are 2 voting system technicians. Those are all full-time county employees. All of our election inspectors also have this political party distinction. They're not required to be personally enrolled in the party, but when they do work at the poll sites, they are designated as either a Democrat or a Republican. And when they go and work together, that's how they are paired off. So at their sign-in table, there's one of each party. At the voting machine, there's one of each party. So every step of the way, there is that bipartisan representation. Our staff is classified as management. We are not union employees. We're not CSEA. We are management confidential. I always think that that's a little interesting, but that's how Ulster County does it for us. So we take an oath of office to uphold the Constitution, the election law. We're responsible for everything that is election related. Logistical items are given to the board's discretion. So John and I determine where the poll sites are, where the early voting centers are, how many we have. And we also designate all of the staffing for the office, both the inspectors and the main staff. John and I also put together the budget for our department. So that's a big project that we do every year, determining how much money we'll need to finance the elections for the next calendar year. We do a lot of effort to make sure that we're basing it off of how many elections we might have, how many primaries, how many voters we expect to engage with the process. We also have been lucky to get a lot of grants in the last few years from both the state and the federal government, as well as some private entities. So we manage all of that. We do all the paperwork, we do the resolution process. All of that is very involved. So that's something that I think a lot of people forget that we do. We do all of the functions of a regular county department in addition to all of our programming that we do. Our biggest concern all year round is maintaining our voter rolls, making sure that that is accurate. That is something that is done on a daily basis. And we take great pride in having as accurate of a poll book as possible when the voters go to the poll sites. They don't have any issues most of the time. And when they do, we try to make that a one-time thing so that the next time they go vote, they don't have any problems. We also train all of our election inspectors. That is something that we are doing right now. We had 2 classes today. John and I train them together. Annually, all inspectors get trained. We have about 650 election inspectors, give or take a few, sometimes more, sometimes a little less. We train all of them. We've also done a lot of effort into making our training accessible. So we have online videos that we recorded last year. So we're always trying to work together to make the training as good as possible so that the inspectors feel secure in what they're doing, and so that the voters also feel that they can be confident when they go to vote that they will have a good experience. We also do all of the intake of documents that get people on the ballot. So petitions, caucus paperwork. If people find issues with any of those documents, they bring those issues to both of us where we have official rulings. And when that's all said and done, we certify who and what is on the ballot. We then run the election, which is now a very long process with 9 days of early voting and a traditional election day. And when that's all said and done and we count all the paper ballots, we certify the election results. We also help out with the smaller districts, so school districts, library, fire, some water districts, village districts. When they ask us for help, they want to use our voting machines. They want us to guide them through the process. We enter into a contractual agreement with those localities, and we aid the clerks or the fire commissioners, for example, in conducting their elections, because they legally have authority over them, but they are not election officials. So they often come to us for some help and some guidance. We do a lot of community engagement. This is one of my favorite parts of being a commissioner, is doing things like we are tonight, going out, talking to people about what the process is, educating the public. We record radio ads, we go on radio programs. The county helps us out with social media. We just had Spectrum News in the office today to talk about our need for election inspectors. So we're always trying to find different ways to to talk to our voters, to talk to the public, to engage with historically marginalized people like high school students, nursing home residents, different community groups, so that everybody is getting the right information. They know that we're a resource to them. Next year, we'll be going into the redistricting process. We met with the commission last night. So once they're all done with their work, both the state and the local county redistricting committees will then give us the data to actually apply to the voters and then educate the voters on their new districts, let them know if their poll sites have changed. That'll be a big project that we'll be starting next year. Overall, our job is very nuanced. It's different every single day, which keeps it very interesting. And it's also different based off of what the election cycle looks like. Local elections are a lot different than presidential and governor elections. So we sort of have lots of different hats, and we try our best to overall help the voters have a good experience so that they feel served in this very important aspect so that they can vote and participate in democracy. Do you want to add anything, John, before I move on?
I mean, I would just say, I think this PowerPoint is an example of how it's not a 2-day-a-year job that the misconception has been, and that every year there's added tasks that continue to build on as we build out and protect our elections.
For sure. The county legislature, I think this is interesting. I was asked to talk about this at another meeting where I presented this presentation, because I think a lot of people, they think the state just regulates everything that we do, but the legislature has a lot of authority over the election office. The county charter in Ulster County says that we serve at their discretion. So they have, again, the ability to appoint us based off of a party recommendation. They can't handpick their own, but they have made rejections of the party's recommendations in other counties. That has been, in those instances, often politically motivated. So that's an interesting aspect of the appointment process. Luckily, we've never had that kind of thing happen in Ulster, but there are examples of it happening in other parts of the state. They have the budgetary authority over our office. They ultimately will approve our budget. That is a process that's starting next week. So we'll be going and talking to them about our 2022 budget. In this way, in other parts of the state, we've been also lucky in this regard, but other boards have seen their county legislators starve them of resources, not grant them the needs that they have to conduct the elections. But at the same token, they also can approve additional staffing requests. They can determine if the commissioners are full or part-time. They can cut salaries. We've seen that in other parts of the state. So it's really interesting. That budget process can really help or hinder an election administrative office. Anytime we bring money in, anytime we bring grants in or enter into a contract with like a municipality or school district, they also approve that process. And lastly, we have seen this, John mentioned it before, but they have the ability to pass local laws where the New York State election law hasn't addressed an issue. They can pass a local law to address one. So they did that most notably with the recount law that they passed in 2015 that guided us for a few years. The state has now put in their own recount law. So largely what the local law did is superseded by the election law changes. But for quite some time, we were one of the only counties in the state that had anything guiding us on recounts or mandating that we do so. So it's pretty interesting how much power the legislature can have in a county and how it can change the experience that the election office has with the voters.
Ashley, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
The League of Women Voters, we had members working in pairs at budget time to lobby our representatives up in Albany to pass that funding that you all needed so desperately. So just for the people that may have been involved with those conversations, because we had a really strong position on that. So just to say it out loud, you guys have what you need and you like everything got to you as it should have been. Is that, I don't mean to ask a loaded question, but we want to make sure that we find out full circle that the efforts were landed where they were supposed to.
We fortunately have been very well funded through the grants of the previous 2 years, to the point where we've had the ability to implement things we thought we would never really be able to do.
Awesome.
Definitely. Yeah, we got all of our equipment for early voting. All the poll pads were funded by the grants. We also last year were able to purchase the central counter for the absentee counting, which for us was a total game changer. It makes the process so much faster, streamlined, and more accurate. It's way more accurate counting it on that machine than it was having the 2 commissioners and 2 deputies hash marking the results of the absentee canvass. We then can turn around and audit it more quickly. So that has been very helpful. So thank you for lobbying for that. They keep throwing us money for cybersecurity resources. So we're going to be using that next year when we move into our new facility and the old Daley Freeman building. So we're still finding different ways to spend down all of the grant funding that we've been lucky enough to receive. So it's been really helpful. If we didn't get it, I don't know, we would still be counting ballots from last year probably.
And since we're on this note, to speak to this coming year's budget, there is a resolution proposal actually in the county executive's budget in regards to our purchase of new voting machines. And this process will play out over the next couple months. And should we get approval for this next budget cycle as a capital project to be able to go on and search for new voting machines, we will be holding public hearings and bringing in the different vendors who will be able to provide us with other newer voting solutions that we'll be looking to implement as well.
Can you
Yeah,
guys give a sneak peek? Is this like you still have a paper ballot, but it's what you put it into that counts it that would be different?
Yes.
Okay.
So we will be inviting your group to definitely come and play with the equipment. We've started playing with it ourselves. So after this election is over, we'll be having those kind of events. Before we decide what we're going to go with, we want to make sure that we get input from community leaders so that everybody is happy with the decision that is made. Also in our budget, and this is also something that's not covered by the state grant funding, is we're asking for 2 additional full-time staff members. We have found that the county has grown, at least in voter population, since the last time we added staff. 20,000 more voters have been added to the voter rolls. And next year, with the beginnings of a 3-year phase-in for automatic voter registration, we think that we're definitely going to need the help. We saw it last year. We didn't have enough people and we had to really do a lot of part-time help. And with a lot of the changes that we're going to talk about in the next couple of minutes, we have found that it's time to add more people. So we both agreed to ask for that in our budget. The county executive approved it. So we'll be going in front of the legislature next to explain why we need extra help.
Right. And that housing boom that we've been having is, obviously so impactful on what you do. So thank you so much for.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's talk about some fun reforms. It has been a whirlwind since January, the first day of session, January 2019. I actually went to Albany. I know a lot of people wanted to go and see for themselves the state pass early voting and a bunch of other things. And all of this happened on day one. So the first thing that they did was they dropped voter pre-registration down to 16 years old. So now we can register 16 and 17-year-olds before they turn 18. So on their birthday, when they turn 18 years old, they don't have to scramble, file paperwork. They might already be off in college. If they pre-register, they don't have to worry about it. As soon as they are of voting age, they'll be able to vote. They're already on the voter roll. The second thing, and we've seen a lot come from this next change, was our in-state transfers. So what that means is a voter who's registered in New York State, if they move, their registration moves with them. It's portable. It goes with them wherever they go. This was very impactful to the affidavit ballots that are cast at poll sites. The rule used to be, in order for the affidavit to be valid, the voter needed to be already registered somewhere in the county. So it really only helped people that moved within Ulster County. Once this was passed, now we get affidavits from voters who have moved from other parts of the state. So long as they were registered elsewhere in New York, their affidavits are now counting because of this in-state transfer rule. It helps us have a better voter database because we get a lot of data from the DMV, and a lot of it is in the form of transfer records. So we are constantly updating people, and a lot of that information is based off of this change to the law. The LLC loophole, that's a campaign finance change that changed the contribution limits that LLCs can give to a candidate. It dropped it down to $5,000 in a calendar year. That was something that they passed to sort of mitigate the influence of high dollar donors who establish LLCs. So the state passed this law, and that's now the maximum contribution limit for those kinds of entities. Another big change that we had all been asking for years and years and years as a bipartisan organization of commissioners was to consolidate our primaries. We used to have a September primary, and then every even year we would also have a June federal primary. We have now eliminated the September primary, and everything happens in June. They also made the hours for primaries uniform across the state from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. as opposed to what we used to run, which was a noon start time for primaries, a noon to 9. Now everybody is 6 to 9. So for Ulster, that was a big deal because we share media markets with New York City, which was 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. So every primary, when we started at noon, people would show up early. They would be irate. How come you're not open yet? Well, now that has all changed and we are open. And then the big one for us that year was the establishment of early voting, effective that November. So in January, we found out we would be doing early voting that year. And better get ready, better buy everything you need, test it all, make sure it works, because it's going to be live. So that was a lot for us to plan and get ready for. And luckily, so far, everyone across the state really handled that well. And now it's becoming just a routine. Other changes, they keep changing rules to the affidavits to try to help us count more and more of them. So substantial compliance is something that, John, if you had $1 for every time I said substantial compliance, you would have lots of dollars.
I'd be a very rich man.
Very rich. Well, this is something that we just, if it's good enough, it's gonna get counted unless somebody files a lawsuit. Substantial compliance is the rule of the day. We try to count as many ballots as we can, as long as it meets minimum threshold standards, it's gonna count. Enrollment changes. Now, this used to be a big deal. People would have to pick their party enrollment in October, the year before the next election cycle. So if that was still the rule in 2021, for next year's primaries in 2022, everybody would have had to have picked their party by last Friday. Now you have a longer time window, and every year that deadline is Valentine's Day. So every February 14th, that's our cutoff date. We used to also have what they call a lockbox, and we couldn't change people's enrollment until after the election. So even if you put in your change in time, it would be set in stone until after the election. Now that's gone away too. And if you change your party, it's effective immediately, with the exception of February 14th until the primary is over. So that's the only time where enrollment isn't automatically changed for a voter that wants it to be. That's the cutoff date. And that's because the primaries in New York State are still closed off, as you all know, closed off and only available to voters who are personally enrolled in the party that is having a primary. Other stuff they did, they changed they allowed people to publish their website address on the State Board of Elections website. State Board of Election now completely runs campaign finance. You used to be able to file, treasurers could file paperwork with us. They have to file it all with the state. They've digitized that process completely. And that's so that people, everyday people, can look up how much money someone has, what they're spending it on. It really just opens up that whole political money, campaign finance, that whole process. They've been taking a lot of steps to open that up and make it very easy for people to find out where the money is coming from and where it's going. Thanks to you all lobbying for us, our grant funding was awarded to cover our early voting startup costs. In Ulster County, that meant that we bought a whole bunch of poll pads and a whole bunch of printers that can print ballots on demand, because we opted to have an open site plan for early voting. That is not a requirement. They left that up to the counties. Counties could either have an open site plan like we do, meaning anybody in the county can go to any of the early voting sites, or some counties didn't go that route and they have regional early voting centers where you have to go to a specific site based off your election district, kind of like election day style. Most of us went with the open plan. So those that didn't are starting to see that everybody else is pretty happy with the open plan and they're starting to change their ways. Orange County, for instance, was, I believe they were a region specific the first year, and they, I believe, have since opened it up and they're doing the open site structure. So all said and done, 2019 ended and they passed 34 chapter laws, which if you follow election law changes, that's a lot of them. That's more than we have seen in years combined.
Yeah, there may have been 34 combined in the past 5 years.
If that.
I would say there is one pinpoint missing from that previous map up to the end of 2019.
What was that?
It's a pinpoint when Jen Fuentes and I joined the office.
Oh, yes, that's a good highlight. That's true. That's true. Yes.
We walked in right when the storm was getting started.
Was this the year that the primary changed as well, that it moved to June?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So the primary change, I don't know, John, you probably get the same grief from your local, your county party. They have to now petition in the winter, February and March. They don't really love that, but it also, for our end, not having a September primary is very helpful. John, you never worked with us when we had September primaries. Especially in a local year, if that primary was close, or if there was an issue and they went to court to fight over absentee ballots and affidavit ballots, we would very often, ourselves and other counties, would go beyond our next step, which is issuing ballots for election day. So if it lagged on and we were in court and battling it out, we would have incomplete ballots to send out to voters for the actual general election, because we would still be fighting it out over who would be on a party line. So
it was a very condensed time frame.
It was crazy. So having it in June, all of that gets resolved in more than enough time to get ready for the general election. We resolve all of our issues, if we have any, in July, so that we can then get started on training the inspectors, get the ballots ready to send out the absentee ballots. It was quite nightmarish, so I am pleased with the new calendar, and I just tell people to buy hand warmers and bundle up when they go and do petitions. All right, so then we started in 2020, and I'm going to get a little bit of PTSD talking about last year. It started out relatively normal. There were limitations set on our annual voter registration check drop dates. So that was a little nuance. They did that. It was kind of off to a boring start. And then in March, COVID hit in New York City. And within 48 hours, we were already in the middle of that wintertime petition season. Governor Cuomo canceled the petition season, said petitions are due in a day, figure it out, get them together, bundle them, check them over, and then you have to file them with the Board of Elections. Usually we have a lot of time to look at them. A lot of our committee people and our volunteers that go out and do petitions, they don't go out right away. They like to wait, they procrastinate. A lot of those people were all of a sudden having to figure out how to get the amount of signatures that they needed. They did help a little bit where they dropped the threshold, but it was very chaotic. It was a very chaotic time. People were freaking out about the political side of things, but the biggest cloud hanging over us was COVID and what this is and what's it going to do. So it was pretty nutty. The state Senate, the state assembly, they then pretty much went remote. They were no longer meeting in person for the session. And they also were trying to figure out what they were doing. So it was pretty crazy. In the time that they did meet, they met about recount laws. So in Ulster, our recount law changed. They also were forming the recount laws that would be effective starting this year on the state level. There was more affidavit changes that keep changing this affidavit process. Every election that happens, they find new problems with the affidavits that they have to fix. So every year we keep seeing changes to that process. One controversial and one big talking point last spring was when they canceled the presidential primary, and that was a state board of elections determination. So those 4 commissioners, they decided that because a lot of the candidates had dropped out in the public spotlight, that they didn't think that because of COVID that we should have a presidential primary. A lawsuit was filed. The litigants won their lawsuit. And so the primary that was originally scheduled for April of 2020 was then consolidated to June of 2020, our regularly scheduled primary, and we held them together. Typically in a presidential election cycle, we have 2 primaries, one in April, one in June, but last year it all happened in June. A big thing that really hasn't started to actually manifest, they're hiring people now, they're getting themselves situated, is the New York State Public Financing Program. So the State Board of Elections now has a new branch of their powers, and that will be running public financing for Senate and Assembly candidates. So they're getting themselves organized for that. That law was passed in 2020. Another somewhat controversial item was the party designation limits that were changed. This was a budget amendment, so it wasn't a standalone. So what happened was they passed a new standard. So instead of every 4 years for a party to get established and officially recognized, it's now every 2 years. So every presidential and every governor's year, the votes that are cast for those 2 offices, as long as those votes exceed 130,000 votes or 2% of the vote, they will then be a party for the next 2 years, an official party. For what that meant for us in last year's election was that only 4 parties last November reached that threshold. The Democrats, the Republicans, the Conservatives, and the Working Families Party. So that's why this year, when voters go to see their ballot, they're not going to see parties that have been around for years. The Independence Party, they are no longer a party recognized in the state of New York. Neither is the Libertarians, the Greens. We had a party for a while called SAM. Those all went away last year because of this new rule, and they can't come back until the results of next November's governor election. So there's still a lot of people debating whether that was a good or a bad thing, but nevertheless, that is what happened, and that is what we have been ordered to administer at the local level. Because of COVID, our absentee processes changed drastically last year. So we were able to accept requests for absentee ballots through electronic platforms. They've removed a signature and an original signature requirement on an application, justifying that the signature comes to the Board of Elections on the voted ballot from the voter. This was a temporary solution, and it was because of COVID. The illness reason, so we have all these reasons that people have to choose a reason to get an absentee ballot. There's a reason that's temporary illness. Last year, that was expanded to include pandemic reasons, spreading of communicable diseases, so that voters who were afraid of getting COVID had a reason that was justified. They could choose if they wanted to vote this way. This also was reflected in a creation of an absentee cure process for voters who do vote by absentee, knowing that a lot of voters were doing this for the very first time last year. The state put in place rules for boards to now apply to those ballots that come to us voted. We check them for deficiencies, and we give the voters a window, an opportunity to fix mistakes that they make on their voted absentee ballot. That could be they didn't sign in the right spot, they didn't sign at all. Sometimes people will send us a ballot just by itself, not in the oath envelope. So when that happens, we then go through the cure process, which is it's great. It has fixed a lot of ballots. We've had ballots this year that we've fixed already through this mechanism, and it really gives us more ways to walk voters through the process to make sure that the ballot that they cast is valid. So I know, Maura, you like the name of this section, the year of executive orders. So last year,
Dum, dum, dum. Is that what you wanted? There should be like sound effects.
seriously, there should be like a GIF of Andrew Cuomo that flies across the screen. Because that's
signing things.
Yeah, that's literally what was happening every other day in 2020. From March until September, we were getting executive orders that changed what we do, what we were supposed to do, and we would find out about it the same day that it happened. So there was no collaboration. Usually with our legislation, they'll ask us, it will give us a little bit of heads up. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? That did not happen with the executive orders. We would get an email, it would tell us what we had to do, and we were expected to do it. Normally, so these are just a few of them. Normally, we go to nursing homes and we help the voters vote their absentee ballot. It's a great process. We have a lot of fun doing it. We go together, Democrat, Republican. We have not been able to do that since 2019. It makes sense why. Nursing homes obviously were a very sensitive and very scary place to be in 2020, but we have seen a significant reduction in votes that come out of those facilities. And I think that's because we're not going there to talk to them and give them the help that they oftentimes need from us. So we are still not allowed to go back. I'm hopeful that in 2022, this will be lifted and we'll be able to go back to our nursing homes. But that was one of the first things that they passed. No more nursing home visits. Again, they canceled the presidential primary. That was moved to June. March had village elections. There were school district elections. So what are we supposed to do with that? And school district elections went to 100% mail-in ballot, so 100% absentee. That was a lot for these school districts to handle. First of all, there were envelope shortages statewide. You couldn't get an envelope to mail in a ballot because every single school district was ordering them at 100% capacity because that's what they were told to do. They then also had issues with the post office and getting their ballots back. So there was a secondary executive order to actually move the date for the return of those school district election ballots. They gave them an extra week to get their ballots in. You talk to a district clerk anywhere in Ulster County, they will tell you that last year was insane. They hated it. They didn't know what they were doing. They had no guidance because they rely on us so heavily for their elections. It really showed that schools and these sub-districts, they really need somebody to help them. If it's not us, then they don't really have anybody there to hold their hand. And when you change the rules on them, it's a big deal. So that just showed us last year, I think, that they need some support for these sub-districts. March villages, they were moved. They didn't tell them when they were going to move them. Ultimately, they got moved to September. So that was a lot of chaos. Again, a hard stop to our petition process. That really coincided with COVID spiking. So those were done. You had one day to turn them in. It was pretty crazy. Again, absentees totally encouraged. We were told last June for that combined primary that we had to send absentee applications to every single eligible voter to encourage them to vote this way. Postage paid, they didn't give us the money to do it. So this was an unfunded mandate. We didn't budget for it. It was something that we were just, you do it. This is what you're doing. Executive order says to do it. Send them out. We don't care. You just have to do it. So that also confused a lot of people. Now a lot of people think that we're going to invite them to do this every year. It was a one-time event. We didn't do it in November of last year. We only did it for that June primary. Political parties were then able to caucus, have their meetings, hold conventions virtually. A lot of them are still doing so. Zoom meetings, we're on one right now. It sort of has become the way that a lot of political organizations, activist organizations, they conduct their business entirely on Zoom. So this has been a continuation. That's not an executive order anymore, but a lot of committees have changed their rules so that they can meet by Zoom, have elections by Zoom. So really change the way that people engage with their political organizations. Again, our cures, our emphasis on counting absentee ballots as soon as possible. That was something that had always sort of been floated around, but it wasn't until last year when we were expected to do it that we really saw that counting the absentee ballots sooner and getting all of the paperwork done, that's what the voters want. So we'll be seeing changes to that next year when we are going to be counting absentee ballots actually before Election Day, starting with the first day of early voting. So that's been a shift that started last year. Then this year, a lot of continuation of COVID. Again, signature reductions for petitions, the OTB process. So OTB is our opportunity to ballot. So that has completely changed essentially between this year's changes where they completely got rid of the opportunity to ballot petition and next year where they've neutered it. So you have to be in the party to do the opportunity to ballot, which sort of defeats the purpose of doing the opportunity to ballot to begin with. That's all been legislated away. So we're not going to see a lot of primaries anymore where somebody's trying to steal a ballot line because the state legislature has effectively canceled that mechanism for ballot access. The nursing home visits were still canceled by legislation for this year. So we'll maybe be able to go next year. Automatic voter registration is going to begin next year. We'll be doing it with the DMV. That's our first agency that we're participating with. Good for us. We have a lot of practice with the DMV already. And then it's going to slowly roll in where all agencies will be participating by 2024. And then by 2025, all SUNY campuses will have automatic voter registration. There was a change to our felons, our felony voters. Once it used to be, you had to be on probation to be able to register again. Then they changed it to an executive order, which allowed for pardons to happen so people's voting rights were restored. This year, they went a step further, and now once you're out of an incarcerated status, you set foot outside, you're free, you can register to vote again. You don't have to wait, you don't have to get pardoned, you can register to vote. So that happened in this last year, this 2021 cycle. Anytime we change a poll site, we have to now post information about the change of the poll site location on the old location. I like to put this one in here because this was our local representative, Jonathan Jacobson. This was his law, so he's very proud of it. So I put it on here, even though we've already been doing this for a really long time, but this is now something that is statewide standard. One thing that did change, and I think now that the deadline is approaching on Monday for the absentee application request, if voters want us to mail them a ballot, they have to get that request in 15 days before the election. So it used to be 7 days, a week before. Now it's 15. The justification for this was the delays in the post office. So people would ask for a ballot, we would send one, and they wouldn't get it in time. So they've backed it up to 15 days. And this is the first election where it's really going to impact a lot more voters. And I think I was talking to my absentee clerk today. We're expecting a lot of angry phone calls come next week when they can't get a ballot mailed to them. They have to come to the office to get it. So I've been seeing a lot of negative feedback on this one already, like on Twitter and stuff. So I'll see this next week if people are upset with us that this law has changed.
Can I ask a question, Ashley, about the felony folks?
Yeah.
Is there anyone doing the work of registering those folks? So in other words, do they have like an exit interview where someone in the penal system puts a form in their hand or discusses that at all? Or is there like parole officers or Department of Social Services that's involved with that in any way?
Not that I am aware of. And I think that that's a good question. I was asked this question a few weeks ago by a candidate for office. I do not know if they are doing that. We only see the back end. So when someone registers, it pings against the Department of Corrections website, which then filters to our New York State Board of Elections database. So we are researching it just to make sure that all the paperwork looks good, and more often than not, that means their registration is valid. But I am not aware of any group or nonprofit or any activist organization that is going out and telling people this. We have it on our website, so it's part of our language. But I don't know. Do you know anyone doing it, John?
Well, I would just say I wouldn't be surprised if by the automatic voter registration implementation in 2024, that this is one of the organization or one of the parts of the State Department that will be playing a role in automatically registering those voters as they leave.
That's a good point. They probably will. But I'll write it down. I'll poke around.
Cindy has her hand raised.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
We did try to go in we asked the sheriff about, folks in the county jail who have not been convicted and those, and so that was not a thing. So we didn't, but we would certainly be happy to, work with others, the DSS and the parole officers to encourage that.
That's a great service project,
Yes, yep, it is. Yes, because we already have interest among league members to get that done. So just saying.
Especially since I've talked to a lot of people over the years that they think they can never register again because that is how it is in other parts of the country. They think that's it for them. They can't vote even if it was 25 years ago. And I'm always happy to tell them that is not true. You can register to vote in New York State. It's a different rule here than it is anywhere else. So
I mean, that may have been explained to them upon conviction, like their attorney might have said, this is what that means for you, and no one has told them that anything changed.
Yeah. Well, we'll get you info so that
Okay.
any questions you have, we'll do our best to look into it. But or I was happy to see this. It's really helped us with the pardoning paperwork. It was annoying. And then they would revoke a pardon and we would have to go through the list again. And now it's just really simple. You leave, you can vote if you want to.
I have one more question. It's really more about absentee. Even though you're vaccinated, if you are still fearful of going into a public place and getting sick, are you allowed to vote by absentee this year?
Yes, yep. So
Yes.
that temporary illness reason was expanded this year to still cover COVID. So if you are, even if you're vaccinated, I mean, there's Delta variants, you can still get COVID if you're vaccinated. So it doesn't matter. We don't ask you your status. If you check that box for temporary illness on the form, or better yet, online, because there's the online application, we'll send you a ballot and you don't have to vote in person if you don't feel comfortable doing so.
I believe the language was specific to being fearful of, so like it added that additional clause onto the temporary
Exactly.
illness.
Yep. So anybody else? I'm going to keep going. All right. So because that calendar is earlier, that primary calendar, the state has been trying to come up with different ways to help candidates who decide that they don't want to run anymore, or maybe they lose a primary and they don't want to continue running on another party line that they've petitioned and gotten on the ballot for. So now that has been changed. If a candidate declines within 10 days after the primary, they can come off the ballot. They used to have to stay on. That has been managed and they've changed that. So that was a different law that was changed. Unfortunately, it wasn't signed into law until after 10 days after the primary. So it didn't affect anybody this year, but going forward, it might help get people off the ballot who feel like they're stuck and they don't want to run in the race anymore. Down below, providing for an online absentee tracking system by 2022, which is next year. So starting next year, voters who vote by absentee ballot, they can look online, they can see where their application is in the process, where their ballot, once issued, is it in the mail yet? Where is it in the mail? Once they send it back, they vote it, they send it back. They can also track it, see that the Board of Elections got it and that it was ruled valid and is ready for counting. So that's something that we've been asking for years. Voters ask us, hey, where's my ballot? We don't know. We put it in the mail 5 days ago. You still haven't received it. All right, we'll send you another one. Now we won't have to do that anymore. We'll be able to see exactly where it is, give the voters a time frame so that they can make the decisions. Maybe it'll change the way that they feel about voting by absentee ballot. The state is allowing for online instruction of inspectors. We in Ulster County have this. We started this last year. We love our online program. It's helped a lot of people get their training done. It really was a positive thing to come out of COVID, showing that we can do things a little bit differently. I hope other parts of the state do the same thing, because we've had good experience with it. The online absentee application, that is something that they started last year by executive order. They continued it this year. We love the online application. I know that the people that are processing the applications love it. It comes in a very easy format for them to put into the system. They don't have to do as many keystrokes. They find it to be a lot easier than the long form that people fill out. It's also very easy for the voters to go on the website, fill out the info, and submit it. We get those a few times during the day. Last year, we were getting them 3 times a day, I think. And we get those online requests on a daily basis, and they go right into production. Starting next year, this is going to be a big change for us. I mentioned it before, but we will be canvassing absentee ballots military and affidavit ballots, starting 10 days before the election. So around the time that we start early voting, we will be opening and tabulating absentee ballots on a daily basis. When the election day comes on that Tuesday, we will then be posting with the results from early voting and in person, also the results of valid absentee ballots and affidavit ballots. So that's a pretty big deal. It's going to be a big change for us. We've always counted them after the election. Now they're going to be front loaded before the election. And we're going to have to figure out how that all happens. We're still trying to process what that means, what equipment we'll need, how much help we'll need. So that's going to be a really big change to what we do at the office. Again, those COVID absentee standards were carried over. So the online request, the removal of a signature on your application. Again, COVID was carried over as a reason. That's the temporary illness code. Our absentee application actually says including COVID, because we want our voters to know exactly what we're talking about. So we put it on there on the language on the form. Early voting is going to be longer next year. More hours, not more days. We'll probably get more days at some point, but right now our hours are the same for this year, but starting next year, they're going to add more hours, more nighttime hours. And they also increased the minimum standards for site designation from Ulster County. We went from a minimum of 2 to a minimum of 4. We're always above and beyond. So we have more than that. We have 6 in November. So the state is starting to catch up to how many people like early voting and have been using it. They also don't want to see long lines like they did last year. So they're trying to figure out and change early voting as it becomes more used by the electorate. A very inside baseball change was that we got an extra judicial Supreme Court judge for our district. They added judges across the state. So we thought we were going to have only 2. We now have 3 on the ballot this year. So that was a booster that we got in this year's legislative session. They changed some rules about domestic violence victims, more protections for not just, that's the biggest population, but other voters who are at risk. They have more considerations for them that we then manage when those voters tell us that they have that need. And lastly,
Can we just hold on a second, Ashley?
Yeah.
Because I talked to groups about this. So that's in particular to their address and their voting history being publicly available through VAN and things like that, correct?
correct. So they're all sealed and they deal with us. They come to the office and we help them vote at the board level so that they're not on a list, they're not in a poll book. They come to us, they have special dispensation. We get them the correct ballot and it's sealed and no one finds out or can find out where they are currently, what's going on with them, even being in the county. They're not coded. So
And they
you
need
can't find
a
them.
court order or order of protection, or they just disclose to you? How does that eligibility happen?
So it used to be just it used to be the court order. You had to go through that whole process. I know that they've relaxed it. I don't remember exactly what the paperwork was because we don't have anybody right now that has come to us with that need. So we haven't had to apply it in a real life situation. So I haven't actually seen it in practice. I've just only read about it. So I'll have to find out exactly what the paperwork is. Do you know, John? I don't know. 'Cause we
The
haven't
only
had
person
one.
that came to us had a court order. And
Yeah, that
that's
was last
the only
year.
situation in which we have encountered it.
Yeah, they have the
There's
court
a
order.
group called Fearless Hudson Valley that's particular to this population and our geographic area. So if you get anything or whatever, let me know. I can share it to those folks.
Absolutely. Sounds good. Then also they put the ballot referendums on this year's ballot. So there are 5 of them. I know that you know a lot about them, but I just want to talk about them in a little bit. I know we talked about our grants before, but this is a snapshot of the grants that we have received since 2019. So we got our early voting grant bucket. For us, that was $224,000. We got our poll site equipment, poll pads, the on-demand printing. We also received in 2020 COVID response money that came from the federal government, from the HAVA Cares program. That allowed us to purchase that clear ballot absentee counter system. We also were able to buy PPE equipment. We cleaned poll sites with that money. In 2020, we also received cyber remediation money. We're currently spending that on upgrades to our technological infrastructure, our servers, incident response, network segmentation. That's expiring at the end of this year. So it's been a big focus in the office on getting all of that done and making sure that we get reimbursed. It's been a little bit stressful because of supply chain issues, but we are doing our best to make sure that that money gets applied. We got a private grant. That's that Center for Tech and Civic Life. That was a private grant that we received. We used that to pay our staff who worked a tremendous amount of hours last year, in excess of their compensation time. We were able to pay them overtime cost. We also covered some other COVID things that we had to spend money on last year that came from this Center for Civic and Tech Life grant. This year, we received 2 new pools of money. The first one is our Technology Innovation and Election Resource Grant. That just all got approved in September. That's going to go toward our new facility. We're going to put in card access swipes to secure rooms, which is really going to help us out when we go to count those absentee ballots before Election Day. Those are all going to be stored in rooms that have card access and are secure and are under surveillance. So we will have secure ballot storage rooms, server rooms, all in our new site at the Daily Freeman. I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to make it a lot more secure just for us, to make people feel better about it. Our early voting expansion grant, this is a continuation to keep helping us out with early voting. So we got a pool of money for that. That's going towards regular costs that we now have for powering early voting, connectivity, equipment, buying paper, buying ink for the on-demand printers. That's an annual expensive cost. So it's nice that the state, since they passed these laws, are helping us offset these annual expenses for having early voting. Any questions before we go to the next? All right, so let's talk about the ballot. I know you're going to have your program on Saturday, but I feel like we would be remiss if we didn't show you what it looks like. So this is just a sample. Where did I pull this from? I think this is the Town of Olive randomly. Here we go, Town of Olive ballot. But generally speaking, everybody's ballots will look like this on the front side. And then on the back side are going to be the propositions. 1 through 5 are the state propositions. Number 6 is the Ulster County proposition. That's a change to the charter. And then if you have them, there are a handful of town propositions or a village proposition like we have in New Paltz. The most we'll have is in the village of New Paltz. We'll have 8 propositions to vote on here in the People's Republic of New Paltz. So quickly, those ballot propositions for the state, we are a little bit used to seeing them. I look at them every single day. The first one is going to remove the reason for voting by absentee ballot if passed. So this will eliminate all of those reason codes that we have had for years and years and years. And anybody who then wants an absentee ballot will be able to get one. The second is the removal of the 10-day advance voter registration requirement, which it doesn't pass same-day registration. I think it's a little misleading the way that I wrote this, but it will mean that next year when the legislature goes back to Albany, they can pass a same-day registration law, which we know is, I know that that's their ultimate goal. So they're trying to get rid of this constitutional hang up so that they can then install same-day registration, new thing that we'll have to unpack and figure out at the board level. The redistricting commission changes to that process. They want to freeze the number of senators at 63, changing the way that they appoint the executive directors. That's proposition number 1. There's a clean air and water proposition that relates to the right to clean air, water, and a healthful environment, making that a right to voters in New York, or to citizens in New York State. And the 5th one is the New York City Civil Court that raises the financial threshold to bring cases to that court in New York City. We all have to consider that one because it's a change to the Constitution. Cindy, I saw you raised your hand.
Yes, I did want to make a note. The league does not support Proposition 1, the redistricting commission, because it doesn't just freeze the Senate at 63 members. It gives a single party total control of the redistricting the maps in New York State. So that is why we are not supporting it.
Cindy,
Yeah, I
are there
did.
any that you do support?
Oh, absolutely. Well, we actually do, the 10-day advance, we're supporting, the no excuse absentee, we are supporting. The others, we don't have a position, we're neutral,
Okay.
people can make up their own mind. But these are the things that we know. I mean, it's really been pretty, it seems like, freezing the Senate at 63 members is a good idea. That's how voters will see it, but it's not necessarily so. I'll be talking about that on Sunday at 2:00.
Sunday, okay. I thought it was
Yeah.
Saturday.
No.
Yeah, we don't take an official position on them. I'm personally for the election changes. The other ones, I don't know. We'll see
Indifferent.
whatever the voters decide, we'll end up having to deal with it. Especially last night, we were talking to the local redistricting commission, and it was very nice of them to invite us, and we told them what we thought. But at the end of the meeting, I just said, they're going to do whatever they want, and then we're going to have to fix it for the voters so that they vote at the right place. They know where to go vote. Redistricting, I don't look forward to it. Every 10 years, I'm kind of like, oh, here we go. It's a pain.
We do support the clean air and water too. Did you say
Oh,
that?
do you?
Yeah, we have I have
Yeah. On the card, we have yes on Prop 3, which is the 10-day advance, and yes on Prop 4, which is the no excuse absentee. And then this is number 1, the redistricting.
that's
These are the only ones that I'm aware of, although I'm sure we all like clean air and water.
no, no, I thought we did. Anyway, we'll see.
Not officially.
Okay.
Well, we have league positions on clean air.
Yeah, and I thought I heard them say that, but it doesn't say that on it.
So let's talk about the ways to vote. Early voting, it starts a week from Saturday. We're getting ready right now. Every poll pad is being uploaded and tested. The machines are being tested. The inspectors are ready to go. And on October 23rd, we'll start early voting. For 9 days, it'll end this year on a holiday, on Halloween. That's fun. The poll sites will be open on Halloween. You can come and vote in your costume if you want to. That would be really cute if you did that. So that is early voting. We have 6 sites situated around the county. So John and I got together in the spring and we talked about where we wanted to put these sites. And this is what we came up with. I think it's a pretty good plan. Again, as you know, but we're still trying to get people to understand that they can go to any of the sites. A lot of people still think that if a site is in Olive, for example, it's only for the people that live in Olive. Or if they live in New Paltz, they have to go to New Paltz, even though they might work in Kingston right next to the Midtown Neighborhood Center. But because there's one in New Paltz, they have to go to New Paltz. Getting people used to the idea that these are sites that for all the voters and you can go to the one that is most convenient for your schedule. It's still something that we're trying to get people to understand. We have these in poster form, in graphic form. We just recorded radio ads last week. So this week leading up to early voting, we'll be really pushing the information to be out there so that when voters are deciding if they want to vote early, they know exactly where to go, when the times are, and the full schedule is everywhere. So share it with your friends, let people know. We vote early. I love early voting. It gets it out of the way. I don't have to worry about it. And I think we have a pretty great plan this year. We went out into the Catskill Park a little more to the west. So we're trying out Olive this year. New Paltz has a new site at the campus. So we're trying that out this year. Down in Marlboro, we went a little bit more southern. So that's a new site. And Saugerties, we've only ever had in primaries. So we're going to give them a site for the general election. They've been doing well with their primaries, having an early voting site. So having one up in their neck of the woods in the northern part of the county, I think will also serve them well for this election. Cindy, I saw your hand go up.
I know. I know where Mountain Road is. My father lives on that road. It's really close to 28, but if you're gonna put a sign on 28, nobody's gonna go there. It's like it's not far, but I'm asking for that to be for people to, because they won't know.
You want more
Nobody-
signage?
Yeah,
can always do more
like
signage.
one out on 28. That's all they need.
They might be able to, we can ask the supervisor if he'll do like one of those electronic signs. I know at the college in New Paltz, the New Paltz police are going to put one out for that site. So
We could probably actually work with the county DPW to get one of those.
yeah,
That would be
'cause
great.
people, what we have, our signs are the sandwich board signs, and you're whizzing by on 28, you might not see it. So I think something that lights up might be better. So we'll talk to them. We'll call them tomorrow and see if we can get one. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
That's a good
I
idea.
appreciate
Yeah,
it.
not a bad idea at all.
Yeah. Any other questions on early voting? Do you all vote early? I'm curious.
I do.
I do.
I do too.
Nice. Yeah, we had a lot of people vote early last year, and it was kind of boring on election day. Everyone already voted.
Well, I think a lot of us are working on election day, so
Mhm.
many of us are at your site. So maybe that's why.
Yeah, our biggest days are always the weekends and the nighttime hours. So the Sundays, the Saturdays always happen. The ones that are more quiet are the Monday and the Friday, and the Wednesday that are 9 to 5. So we're still figuring out how this all works and what works best for people. But so far it's been successful for us in Ulster. We like it. So the less stress we have on the day of the election, the better. Again, we're always promoting our website, voteulster.com. Check it out. We are also always open to feedback. We get a lot of feedback on our website. We take that feedback seriously. It helps us make a better website. I think that sometimes John and I and our staff, we live and breathe the election. So we take for granted what might confuse people. So if we don't hear anything from people like this didn't make sense to me, it's going to stay the way it is. But when people do say, I don't understand, or can you try to put this or word this in a different way, it helps us out a lot. And we've been, it's always a work in process. And the more we can get online and out there, the better.
Can I ask you, are you going to have stickers this year?
Yes, we are.
That was a loaded question.
People love them.
Yeah.
They do.
I'm going to show you it in 1 second.
Okay.
We really do need election inspectors. I know I have 12 vacancies that I'm trying to fill. John, you've got vacancies too. I don't
Down
know
to
how
2.
many- Oh, he's down to 2. It's not fair. I need to fill my vacancies. I also want backup people just in case. I don't know what's going on this year. I think people are kind of tired of the having to talk
Election
about elections
fatigue.
all the time. But we really need to staff our poll sites. We're training people now. We pay people $15 an hour, $60 for the class. The class is fun. You come and hang out with us for a few hours. Please ask people to do it. And if you find anyone, call me and let me know, because John only has 2 vacancies and I have 12.
Where are your vacancies?
I have them all over the place. So Esopus,
Yeah.
Hardenburg, New Paltz, Rochester, I have 2. So I've got them all over, northern, southern, east, west. I've got a spot for almost everybody.
And if you know somebody who's willing to travel, it makes it that much easier.
Yeah, and we pay them for traveling, so they'll get mileage.
But they
Um,
have to be there at 5:15.
Yes, that's the downside.
That's my-
I might cut them a
Exactly.
break.
Yeah, we might cut them some slack if they're traveling. This year, I know, Cindy, you've seen our book for kids, but we have developed a coloring activity book for children. It covers a lot of ages, actually. I would say between 1st grade or even kindergarten, all the way up to 6th and 7th graders can have fun with the book. It's quite long. I think we've got like 60 pages in this booklet. We worked with the clerk's office to develop it. It's also on our website. Voting for Kids with our mascot, Billy the Ballot. That's him right there. Check it out. We'll hopefully be able to go back into schools starting next year. We want to start talking to younger kids. We always go to the high schools, and I think it'll be fun to also go a little bit younger, middle schoolers, and talk to them about how important voting is. And it's a lot of Ulster County specific information. So I think we also live in a pretty great place. So showing them how that all connects to democracy and the country and the county. It's a really cool program.
I
And
have a
there it
question.
is.
Is Billy Ballot the child of I'm Just a Bill from Capitol Hill? Do you know what I'm talking about? From Schoolhouse
Yeah.
Rock?
We didn't build that storyline in, but we very well could.
Oh,
We didn't-
Bill was the
We
best.
didn't give them a backstory. They are gender neutral, so that we did like have a discussion about, is Billy a boy or a girl? Well, Billy is a ballot box, so they are they, and it's Billy with an IE. So that is Billy. I started coming up with Billy's life story, but everybody was just like, you're insane. So maybe for the next edition, we'll have a backstory for
Yeah.
Billy.
And
You-
a
you
song.
will-
A song would be great.
Yeah, a song. I like a song.
You will
Well,
get to see
I can
Ashley and I
admit-
as a Bitmoji in
Oh,
there.
And Nina Pasterpak. We are all animated
Yes,
characters
yes.
in the book.
Oh, cool. He has a mask on, so it looks like he's gonna steal the ballots.
oh no.
Oh, Quran.
Here is our I voted sticker. This is what it will look like when you vote at early or on election day. We did a contest and the winner, well, we had a vote. We chose our top 5. And then we turned it to the voters, the public to vote on. And this was the winner. Juliana De Benedetto from New Paltz High School was our winning artist. We showered her with praise and gifts, and the county legislature gave her the distinction of the Pride of Ulster. So we have ordered these. They will be at the poll sites. And we had a lot of fun with this. Hopefully we'll do it again next year. And this will be
Yeah.
something that we do every year to sort of give local students the opportunity to use their creativity to promote something as cool as voting.
We'll definitely be doing this every year.
Yeah.
Yeah, see,
This
Craig,
might have been the toughest election that we had. There might have been some double voting.
Yes, we actually had to put some security measures into the voting website for the sticker because family members were voting multiple times. So there was a bit of double voting happening for the sticker contest. We clamped down on that very quickly and resolved that issue. So she is the true winner.
She got my vote.
Yeah.
You know, the
Uh,
league uses the ice cream thing, to explain stuff. Ranked choice voting, we use the ice cream motif, but maybe the stickers is going to be the next example.
There you go.
Yeah, vote for your fave sticker. We have them all. We put them also in the coloring book too, so that was in there as well.
Can I ask you about the redistricting conversation the other night, or would you rather have me ask it another time?
No, we can answer that.
Yes, totally fine.
Because having done the list, the lines last time, and sitting there when Tom came in and said, by the way, you've made it very difficult for us. It was kind of really late in the game. I think we were pretty much done. And so partly I was just really relieved you were there, because I thought, why didn't we know? I mean, we could have tried to do some of this, but the more I heard about what you asked for, the more impossible that seems. I mean, what Fawn brought up about where her polling place is, is a kind of example of how impossible that, because there's so many factors at work about where all the lines are. What we did was go around and for everybody else, she was just saying, well, people are, they have to clean up all these lines because people are voting differently from their neighbors in 3 different elections or something. It seems to make no sense. But we just look at what makes sense from the little perspective of the legislator lines. And it's hard enough to do it that way and make the whole map work. And a little bit we could have changed, if we knew that we could have moved it 1 block or something, we could have done it. But I mean, in big changes, you really can't. So I don't know what the answer to that is, but I would just say, I heard them they haven't gone through the process yet, the people there on the commission. And you all had, are wishing that this, but I think both sides have to be patient with the other and try to listen to what you said, because I think that'd be great if we could accommodate you. I think it's
At the very least, poll sites are the easiest to move if they have to move.
that's what I would think.
But the data and the way that it is communicated to us is probably the most important, because it will determine how easy our process goes. So as long, and I believe they heard us, as long as they take that part into consideration as to working with the vendors and making sure that the vendors are in communication with our information services now rather than at the end, and how that information is exported and imported into our voter registration system to map the files, that will make our life the easiest. And I think that's the very least they can commit to at least upholding in a way.
Right, because there were no overlays for us. And I don't think Rob, who's doing it again this time, I don't think he knew last time any of this stuff. So just going by census blocks.
Yeah. Yeah. Last time, I wasn't, Tom and Vic were the commissioners for the last redistricting. I was just hands on deck for the clerical side of things.
Right.
And we did the redistricting on a weekend. 3 days we did this process because we had to turn around and have people go out and petition for the districts.
I heard it was awful. Yeah.
It was awful. It was literal crayons on maps and colored pencils, and it was chaos. And we were not really being directed and helped by anybody, and we just did the best that we could, and it has resulted in 10 years of having to go through and clean up mistakes as we find them. That's not the way to redistrict. So I was very encouraged by the timeline that I heard last night, because if that reigns true and it stays even within that realm of reference, then we will have more than enough time to go through and use the tools that we have that we didn't have 10 years ago, that luckily we've caught up on the technology front as well, where we can go in and lay this out And to the extent that we have to change people's poll sites, as much as, in a perfect world, we don't have to change anybody's, we know we'll have to change some districts. We know we'll have to change some poll sites, but the sooner we can get that information and know what those changes will be, then we can go out and talk to those voters, send them mailings, speak with them, put this all on the internet, which that didn't happen 10 years ago. So people are not surprised that when they go to vote on election day, that their poll site is changed as a result of a district change. It's also going to help us that we'll be rolling out, luckily, hopefully, God willing, our new voting systems the same year that we're doing the new district lines. So when we do our community outreach for the new machines, we can also do our outreach to show people what the maps look like now.
But it also sounds like just giving people a heads up. And I don't know why Rob didn't have this information before, whether it's a technology improvement now, but if he could have had maps overlaid, on the census maps, and we could have seen that, he would have been very happy. I mean, he's in the planning department. I'm sure he wanted to make this match up better, I would think.
Yeah.
So your key sentence, I thought, was we just weren't prepared last time, and that's not on you or you or John. So that's good. I mean, I don't know how much preparation they could have done back then, but
it seemed like they couldn't do much more than what they got, because we didn't have the tools that we have now.
Well, it's great that you went, and I was really delighted to see that happening up front instead of at the end. So that's good.
Yeah, me too. And we hope to continue the conversation. We're not here. The last thing I want to do is influence and tell people what to do. I don't, because at the end of the day, my capacity to care what the districts look like politically is next to zero for the legislature. So wherever it lands, it's what it's going to be. My concern is for the voters, so that they know what's going on and that they don't have to reimagine everything that they've gotten used to over the last 10 years.
I hope those people seem pretty thoughtful, and
yeah, everybody seemed really great. So it was a good meeting.
Yeah. There shouldn't be any animosity. I mean, you're all trying to do the same thing, I think.
For sure.
Hey, I have a question, and this is more about the get out the vote efforts that always just feels like such a heavy lift after a presidential year. There's this like great exhale, I guess, so people feel like they don't need to go. And of course, our organizations and people like us are beating the drum and getting people out and telling them how important it is. And so, layer that with this, just ongoing malaise about how life is, and pandemic and masks and health concerns and all those kinds of things. So I think I'm worried that if the turnout is depressed in number that this year, that some of the locations, like the college being something that, has been advocated for so many years, if finally we have a voting location at the college, and then if that number is really low, will it not be considered next year? Like, do you look at that kind of traffic information when deciding where next year is going to be and say, well, we tried it, didn't work?
So out of all honesty, that this is probably the perfect year to give SUNY Ulster that test run. If we had tried to do it in a presidential year or in an even year, we probably would have overloaded our capacity. And if we were in a situation that we were in last year, I don't know that we would have been able to properly respond to give that site the most attention that it needed. So this is a great test run. Speaking to that, I know that Ashley and I, at the end of the year, will also be sitting down to sort of look at all the poll sites and how they functioned. I don't think turnout will be one of the major considering factors, because we don't expect it to be as high as last year. So we won't have that much stress on our system. But you will see that fatigue. We're already seeing it in our absentee numbers. There's only roughly maybe 4,500 absentees compared to 2 years ago, which was over 12 or 13 total that were issued and about 7,000 or 8,000 returned. We only have about 700 to 1,000 returned already. So we are already seeing that fatigue on the absentee side. I can only imagine what it's going to be for early voting and on election day. And I think it's going to be one of those age-old questions, which is how do you motivate somebody after they feel like everything has just been so exhausted from the previous year?
Yeah, we might go from the highest turnout last year to one of the lowest turnouts this year. Variety of factors. There's hardly anyone voting for running for office from the top
Contested.
that are contested. I think that's also has to do with COVID. I know from an elected official standpoint and people that go out and try to get people to run for office, it was very difficult to convince people to not just serve in that capacity, especially in a local level where you work a lot of hours and you're not really compensated fairly for it. So it was very hard to find people to even think about running for office in the middle of a pandemic, let alone in the kind of political culture that we have. So not having those candidates that are out with opposition running, that's really not going to inspire people to vote. We have obviously the propositions, which I think are interesting, but that's also sort of a higher knowledge voter that's paying attention to that kind of stuff. For poll site designations, we take every election and we look at what's going to be the needs of the electorate for this kind of cycle. I agree with you. We've been trying to get in the campus for so long. And I also agree with John that this is a really good year to not just get people used to going there, that what does that look like? How do I navigate this campus? But also it gives the college the experience of hosting early voting. And I will say for them, they are bending over backwards to welcome us, to give us spaces for people to park, to accommodate our election inspectors who will be there every day. They have been working with us more than any of our early voting sites in the history of us doing it to make sure that it's successful. So to the extent that people vote, we will look at that, but it's not going to be our main decision-making standard.
Can you tell me what kind of COVID health protocols will be used by the inspectors as well as the public coming in?
Before we answer that, I'm on 1% battery, so I might end up losing you guys. And I do just want to say thank you for hosting this event. I know this time last year, Ashley and I were taking this conference call from our office as we continued working through the night, at least till about 9 o'clock, because of COVID. And with that being said, our COVID procedures pretty much haven't changed from last year. We will be doing everything we can to provide masks, hand sanitizer, and in the case that somebody might need gloves or something, there may be some available in our bags for people to grab and use. We will be wiping down surfaces again as frequent as possible using disinfecting wipes, and simply trying to keep up the mask and the poll site policy to allow for a very safe and cleanly experience when you go to the poll site.
Will they be mandatory? Will it be mandatory to wear your mask inside?
Yes.
Yeah. So regardless of vaccination status, this is also the county's policy too. So all of our county offices, this has been something we've been doing for, at least a few weeks now. I think since August, we've been fully masking at work. So we've applied that standard to our poll sites. Our inspectors will be wearing masks. We're not checking vaccination status because the expectation is that everybody will be wearing their mask. And for the inspectors, they have to show us either proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test within 48 hours of working at the poll site. So we are also doing that for the people that are working for us. And we've been collecting that information from them for the last few weeks too, or alternatively, setting them up for their COVID testing.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We love questions. Get your friends to be election inspectors. 12 vacancies.
I'll mention it again on Sunday.
Thank
too.
you.
Well,
Well,
thank you so
for
much.
having us. We
Yeah,
love
really
coming and talking to you. We love talking about this. We're a bit, we're two big nerds, so we have a lot of fun doing this kind of stuff.
You guys are great.
We're great.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm gonna stop recording before everybody